This is a simple example of using the ISLM model to analyse policy. In this case, the government of a small developing country gives all public sector workers a large pay rise. And it's an example that elsewhere I've done a film analysing using the Keynesian cross. Here we're using the ISLM model. So we're going to assume that it's output we're interested in mainly, so we start at this level of output here. Let's assume that's Y0. And we also know that we start at this level of interest rates. That's Y0. And here's the initial level of interest rates, R0. So we have an increase in government spending. And this is a fiscal expansion. Fiscal policy and its expansion is an increase in government spending. So an increase in government spending or a decrease in taxation is a fiscal expansion. And what that's going to do is, for any level of interest rates, the desired level of expenditure for a given level of output is going to be increased. In other words, the IS curve is going to move to the right. So for any level of interest rates, the desired level of expenditure for any level of income increases because we're increasing government spending. Another way of looking at it is to say that at any level of interest rates, the level of investment that makes investment and saving, the level of output that makes investment and savings equal, increases. So fiscal expansion means that IS curve shifts right. So again, we'll try and get this to come out with the rear okay. I apologise, it's meant to be parallel. Don't really need deep meaning to it if it doesn't look completely parallel. Apart from the fact that I can't see very straight. There. So there's the new IS curve. And again, when things are changing, it's good to then label them 0 to 1 or 0 to 1 or 1 and 2 or something. So we'll go from IS1, IS0, sorry, goes to IS2. And we can see that this means we move to new equilibrium here. So the thing we're most interested in is to see that there's an increase in output. To there, it's clunky. Goes to Y1. So our conclusion we're most interested in is an increase in Y0 from Y from Y0 up to Y1. We do note that the pure increase we predict from the Keynesian cross would have been from here up to here, a bigger increase. We don't get all the way, we don't increase as much as this increase in spending here, the increase in equilibrium outputs. If interest rates stay the same, it's predicted as here in the Keynesian cross. So the full multiplier effect will take us up to here. Because in the ISLM model we allow interest rates to vary, the money market effect line here tells us that in actual fact at the higher level of output interest rates would have to rise. So interest rates can go up to here. So we get a slightly lower increase in outputs. And that's because even though G is rising, I would be dampened by the increase in interest rates. So we have a increase in interest rates from R0 to R1, which means that there'll be a fall in investment. So we have an increase in output, less than predicted by the Keynesian cross. Because I falls. So the increase is less than we predicted in the previous example because this time we take into account the fact that investment falls because of the interest rates being pushed up, which is called the crowding out effect, so we don't go all the way to here. What are the limitations of this analysis? Well, we've taken interest rates into account, but still the other main thing we've neglected is the price level. We're assuming here that the price level stays the same. To capture the effects of the price level, we're assuming that price level is fixed. So we need to look at the ADAS model to see what happens if we allow price level to change, which is a bit more realistic. Beyond that, of course, we had all the objections previously that even these economic models don't take into effect, these macro models take into account the aggregate amount of spending and investment and so on, don't take into account particular details, like perhaps public sector workers are only a very small group, so it would have a small effect. Perhaps behaviour would change, they'd save the money instead of spending it or spend it on exports, or imports rather, which is another thing outside the model. Perhaps the private sector workers would get cross and also raise the price as well. Perhaps the government would get overthrown. Perhaps a meteorite would hit the earth and we'd all be eaten by a giant. All these things we can bring in after we've done the basic economic analysis. So here's just the simple predictions of the model, the ISLM model, but we can then take that further and look at more sophisticated models like the ADAS and other political variables. And that's the end of the first example.